Do we really know what happened? The brother did it.
The brother, that's what I thought too!
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious. We're both into like true crimes.
Deathy Murdery thing.
Yeah. Maybe that should be the title.
Deathy Murdery thing.
Could be that. Could be something not that, because that sucks.
That's gonna be your theme song.
This is Mystery Murdery Thingy.
Let's start the show.
Are you ready to start the show?
Let's start the show.
Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Or whatever.
My goodness.
Oh my goodness.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Once again, we are here on an early Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, we're just figuring stuff out right
You know,
now.
this just seemed like the best time, to do a high-energy podcast about mysteries.
Ooh,
when we've been laying in bed watching Bub's Burgers.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Okay.
We made it to episode 15.
What is this podcast?
Mystery Murdery Thingy.
Who am I?
Chloe.
Who are you?
Mario. Or Mario.
No.
Some people say it that way. I don't care.
Honey, no.
I don't care.
No.
It's whatever.
Okay, are you doing a mystery, murder, or a thingy?
I'm doing a thingy.
Oh, yeah, we're both doing thingies because this is our third part of doing like a little paranormal
We wanted
theme.
to get a little ghosty.
Yeah, I wanted to get a little ghosty. I have a story and you have a story. And
we were talking about throwing clay earlier. We should watch the movie Ghost. Have you ever heard about that movie?
with Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze is a ghost, and I won't give away the plot, but there's a point where
Goldberg is in it.
Whoopi Goldberg's in it. She's like the medium, I think.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's weird. I don't
There's
like
that part where like he's behind her as the ghost and like doing the clay to get it's gets a little steamy. Oh, that God. Patrick Swayze. Ooh, what a hunk. Right?
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Who wants to go first then?
I'll go first.
Ooh. Sorry, what? Okay, you go first. Okay. Oh, and then at the end, I'm going to do a kind of bigger weird shit in the news as a sort of maybe preview of what we'll eventually try to give out as like an extra segment for Patreon subscribers. Once we actually set it all up.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. Okay. Go, Chloe, go. Chloe, go.
Stop. My computer froze.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm ready. So I'm going to talk about Tony Jo Henry, a.k.a. Anne Beatrice McQueeston. That's what the documentary said. Anyway. Basically, she was the first woman in Louisiana to be executed by the electric chair.
Oh, okay.
So she was born in January of 1916. She was born as Anne Beatrice McQueeston, but she was called Tony Jo Henry, which is very different, right? I don't know.
Because she was like such a tomboy or something?
No, she was like known as this like gorgeous girl.
Oh.
Who was persuasive and like stuff. So just keep listening.
Okay.
So her hometown is Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Oh, I've been there.
Really?
Yeah, I have relatives that live in Lake Charles.
So her mother died when she was 4, and from tuberculosis, and that's why her aunt took her in. And unfortunately, that was an abusive household. She did not do well there. She started running away, and then by the time she was 17, she was addicted to cocaine, and she earned money by being a sex worker. So she was arrested a lot for assault, larceny, and vagrancy. She served a short stretch of time in jail for cutting off part of a man's ear with some scissors. She's a badass bitch. And not
Not that we're condoning violence.
Not that we're
or
condoning violence or
anything.
anything. She gained a reputation for being, quote, the most ornery gal east of the Mississippi.
Nice.
So, here she is being a sex worker, doing her thing, making her money, and she meets a man named Claude Henry, also known as Cowboy, she met him, at work. They instantly fell in love. This is how the story goes. They, instantly fell in love. He helped her kick her cocaine habit. He helped her get clean, and they were married in 1939. Unfortunately, Claude had some skeletons in the closets because he was actually on the run from killing a police officer in Texas.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
And so eventually he was arrested for it.
Sure.
And he was taken back to Texas. He was tried and convicted of murder, and he got 50 years in Huntsville unit in Texas. So this was obviously heartbreaking for Tony Joe. So what she decided to do was to break him out of jail. So she recruited Harold Finnan Burks, a.k.a. Arky, to break Cowboy out of prison. What they did was they hitchhiked. They were trying to hitchhike to Texas from Louisiana.
Right.
And they got into the car with a man named J.P. Crowley. For some reason, because they're fucking crazy, they kidnapped him. They took him to a field. They forced him to strip, and then they tortured him. And TJ shoots him in the head, and he dies instantly. And they just leave him there. She had a .32 caliber revolver. So they took off with Crowley's car, the dude they just killed, and then they went to a bar. They got really drunk, and they started talking. They started bragging about what they just did and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, eventually they were arrested. And then after that, the body was found. So both Arky and Tony Joe were convicted of the murder because neither of them, fessed up. He said she pulled the trigger, and she said he pulled the trigger.
Of course.
He said, she said. So they were like, all right, we're just, convicting you both of murder.
Right.
And they were sentenced to hang. But here's the thing. I guess this is the big emphasis on why Tony gets her way, because she's beautiful and persuasive and angelic, and by this point she's famous or notorious. Mm-hmm. She got 3 trials.
What? 3
trials. Because of her influence, she used her good looks to her advantage, and she totally fucked the system. I mean, you fucking might as well, right? You're sentenced to die. So the first trial was March 27th, 29th in 1940. And there they appealed. She was convicted of the same thing and was sentenced to death. But she appealed, and they granted it to her. And the next one,
which wasn't always the case back then, by the way. Nowadays we have this sense that you just have your trial, and then you can appeal and appeal and appeal and appeal and get to the Supreme Court. That was not typically the case back at this period of time.
Is it like that now?
Now it is. If you have a capital case, you're probably going to be in appeals for 10 or 15 years.
What?
There's automatic appeals if it's a capital case. Back in the day, that was not the case at all. Usually it was just the trial, and that was it.
Yeah. So the first trial happened, she got appealed, and a lot of this had to do with the severity of the charges, as well as Tony herself, because the trial got a lot of press coverage.
Sure.
The second one was in February the next year, and in this one, Arky Burks testifies against her. So then she's sentenced to death again, and appealed and got a new trial.
Okay, so what happened in that third trial?
In the third trial, which was in January of 1942, so another year later, it was the same thing. She was sentenced to death again, but by this time, Louisiana had started using the electric chair. So she did appeal, but she was denied, was not granted that one. Mm-hmm. And so she was sentenced for death on November 28th, 1942. So during all of these trials, as her appeals go through and whatnot, Cowboy was released on close supervision, and he went to Lake Charles to try to get a confession out of Tony. So he was successful. She admitted to him that she shot Crowley right between the eyes. This was at this point, Tony became a celebrity, even more notorious in prison and on the outside world. She was given special privileges in jail. She was allowed to keep a pet. If she like asked for a cigarette from a guard, they'd roll her cigarettes.
It was like one of those little Paris Hilton dogs.
Yeah, and she had like a carpet in her. I mean, I'm just making that part up, but
right.
So she has all these special privileges, blah blah blah. Cowboy broke out of prison farm to go visit her a few days before she was electrocuted, but was recaptured quickly. So I think he was arrested like 3 times. The first time he was sent to jail, then he was released on supervision, went to go see Tony, and he was arrested again, and then he was escaped, and then was arrested again. It's 3.
Okay.
Right?
I think so.
Just the way I wrote this was not done well. Okay.
It's fine.
So Tony was granted permission to call him on the day of, and of course this was against the rules, but she was given a special hairdresser on this day when they had to cut her hair before the execution, and apparently a big part of her was her hair.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a symbol of her, and she would comb it, and she loved it, and she screamed bloody murder when they tried to cut her hair. But, I mean, they did. They had to.
It's so weird, right? Like, she can just kill someone and then, like, not even think about it and go get drunk.
Yeah.
But cutting her hair off causes her, like, intense pain.
It's crazy.
So strange, yeah.
So in the days leading up to her execution, she asked to be baptized, and she asked to be buried with a crucifix. She then admitted that she was the lone shooter of Crowley, which was, and when she admitted that, it was an attempt to save Arky's life because he was also sentenced to hang, but it was too late.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that the state of Texas would give a shit about that. I do not see them caring about that at all.
So then Toni Jo Henry became the first woman to be electrocuted in Louisiana. So after her death, Cowboy was released from jail, and 10 years later, he was shot and killed.
Okay.
So it is said that Toni Jo Henry haunts the Calcasieu Parish Courthouse. So this is the courthouse where the trials took place, and it's in Lake Charles. It was the same exact place where she was convicted, where she got so much press coverage. So there's a certain stairwell that they say is like a floor above where she supposedly died. Mm-hmm. They can hear screams that like echo. And
no, don't cut my hair.
Well, yeah.
Oh, my hair, my hair, my hair.
She's being electrocuted. The custodian, who at one night when he closed up the place, he talked about hearing voices, mm-hmm. and he said it's happened to him probably 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
We talked in the documentary. Talked about talked to some secretaries. And one of them said that she would smell the burnt hair in the office.
Right.
Smell that too.
Right.
Another weird thing that happened was the doors would lock. So Julie Gillory, an employee at the courthouse, talked about how she went to the hall. She got up, went to the hall to get something, came back, and the door was locked. But the front door of the office has latch door handles that have to be locked and unlocked with a key.
Ah.
And she says it happens a lot.
Yeah.
Like weird shit like that. Brandy Bordeaux, an employee who was the only person to be scheduled one certain morning, turned on this like rotating file machine. I didn't really understand what it was, but they like showed a picture of it. She left to go do some other sorting, and when she came back, they were off. And even the switches that she had turned on were all off. Mm. And a lot of her coworkers didn't believe her. They were like, yeah, right, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple weeks later, it happens again, but the file machine turned on by itself, like right in front of the 2 other people.
Wow.
So it's just weird. She just seems to kind of fuck with people still.
Lots of different stuff, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you said that was where the execution itself took place, too, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that would make sense. And, they say with ghosts, it's like the intensity of the emotion or the kind of horribleness or intensity of the death is like what causes that. Because that's one theory of what ghosts are, right? Is it's like the after image of the emotion or what that person experienced in life, and the residue of that somehow gets like caught up in the place, and that's like what it is.
So there's my ghost story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Do you think ghosts are real, Mario?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
So we did this three-parter for nothing?
Well, I don't know if we were ever going to come to a definitive conclusion. You already thought they were real.
Of course.
So
I just think it's obvious. I don't know.
But it definitely, stories like this and like the one I did last time certainly make it more plausible to me. Or at least make me say that you can't dismiss it out of hand. I'm forced to be agnostic when it comes to ghosts because I don't feel like we can truly know.
One of those.
But even this, it's like it doesn't necessarily have to be a ghost per se, or at least not in the way that we think of it, right? Where it's like another sentient being that exists somehow outside of our realm of existence, but is like in some way the same person as the dead person. This seems like maybe it's, like I was saying, more like the sort of conscious residue from
the energy.
The energy, in some sense, that was left over from a living person's consciousness. But it doesn't necessarily, get tied to another conscious being that still exists in and of itself. But do I wish that I could meet Casper and we could hang out and, play with his little ghost dog? Sure.
He has a ghost dog?
Yeah. Doesn't he? The little ghost dog?
I think you're thinking of Nightmare Before Christmas.
Well, that too. Of course, that wasn't a ghost, but...
Zero? Yeah, he was a ghost dog.
Oh, he was a ghost dog. You're right. I think they both had ghost dogs, if I remember correctly.
All right.
Maybe.
What you got for me?
Okay, so...
Something good.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about the Flying Dutchman. The mystery of the Flying Dutchman. So the Flying Dutchman...
Green?
Well, you
never watched SpongeBob, did you?
Some, yeah.
Okay. The Flying Dutchman was a recurring character.
Oh, that makes sense. And there's a lot of depictions of the Flying Dutchman, who I guess is technically the captain, although a lot of people use it to refer to the ship as well. There's like a lot of there's like an opera about it. There's songs and TV episodes and movies and like paintings and all this different stuff. Poems, epic poems that involve the Flying Dutchman. There's like all these different things. But all in all, it's the legend of a ghost ship that is supposed to be a bad omen for sailors. If you see it, it's supposed to mean death and destruction for your crew. So don't be looking for the Flying Dutchman. And it's called the Flying Dutchman because it's supposed to be a ghostly, ethereal ship that sails above the water, and when it comes in contact with a living ship, it kind of dissipates and goes away. And you can see that Flying Dutchman himself astride the ship and his ghostly crew. And it's said that the ship is one that could never land at port and was cursed to sail the sea forever. So that's the sort of...
So the Flying Dutchman wasn't a person?
Well, it refers to the person, like the captain of the ship, but also to the ship itself. And the myth of the Flying Dutchman first appeared in kind of the late 18th century in several poems and books. But by the 19th century, the story had turned in that it was a cursed pirate ship. And the legend may have been based on a 17th century Dutch captain named Bernard Folk, who sailed for the Dutch East India Company. And it was said that he was so quick to sail from the Dutch Republic to Java that he was in league with the devil. That's the only way he could have done it.
All right.
Or he knew how to sail real well. I'm not sure, but it could have been the devil.
He was just really good at sailing.
He was so good at sailing that he was Satan.
Okay.
Maybe. And there were several reported sightings also in the 19th and 20th centuries, including one by the future King George V of England. And here's a kind of a longish quote from his diary that describes the incident in which he saw the Flying Dutchman.
Oh my gosh.
Quote, July 11th, at 4 a.m., the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows, a strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did the quarterdeck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle. But on arriving there was no vestige nor any sign whatever of any material ship was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm. 13 persons altogether saw her. At 10:45 a.m., the ordinary seaman who had this morning reported the Flying Dutchman fell from the foretopmast crosstrees onto the topgallant forecastle and was smashed to atoms.
God.
So there's the bad omen. Don't look at it. You'll die. Get out. Unfortunately, the Flying Dutchman has been pretty conclusively shown to be an optical illusion.
Yeah, sounds like Henry was on acid.
Right. So, poor King George V was taken in by what's called a Fata Morgana, which is a special, it's the optical illusion that appears under special atmospheric conditions, specifically a thermal inversion. So where usually hot air rises, right? So you have the hot air on top, the cold air on bottom. In certain circumstances, you can get a thermal inversion where you have the hot air on the bottom, the cold air on the top. And when light rays pass between them, they can get reflected at a certain distance. And this creates the Fata Morgana. And this can actually happen in the tundra and also in the desert. So it's just kind of an optical illusion in the lower atmosphere. But when you're at that certain distance, you see the image of it in the sky, but you don't actually see the object itself because it's so far away.
That's kind of cool.
And so that's why it looks like it's a flying ship. And actually, usually the images appear upside down. Okay. So you would probably see an upside down flying ship that's kind of like wavy and shimmery.
That's creepier.
That's why they thought it was like a ghost ship, a pirate, ghost ship that they had seen. So, but it is pretty obvious. We know now that it's simply an optical illusion. So, too bad for the ghost
Bummer.
ship. I know, right? But who knows? Who really knows?
I don't know, Mario. Do you think you know?
I don't know. No, I don't.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. So that's the mystery solved, maybe? Mystery of the Flying Dutchman. Yeah.
So, ghosts are real. Done
Ghosts
deal.
may be real or maybe not so real. And, of course, we'll end up talking about more ghosty stuff, I'm sure, in the future.
Of course.
Because
this is not the end.
Yeah, of course not. And we'll continue to debate this issue. But I think at some point we should also, and we kind of talked about this, we should go to somewhere that is haunted or that's known to be kind of haunted.
This was my idea.
Yeah. So we're hoping to do that at some point and do kind of a.
I don't know if I want to.
We should an on the spot. No Ouija boards though.
I'd probably start crying in there.
Would probably make for good content.
Oh my
as
god!
They say.
You ass.
Right? Hey.
Oh my goodness.
You know, gotta think like William Friedkin or whatever, right?
That's true. That's actually very true.
Use it, you know. If it's real, why not?
Next.
Okay, so
Next on the agenda.
Next on
Silva.
What's our other segment? Oh yeah, weird shit in the news. Weird.
What did you say that the whole time?
That's a weird sound. Would probably get kind of annoying after a little while. Fine. So I am going to give us a bit of a taste, perhaps, of a longer weird shit in the news, akin to the segment maybe that we'll do for the Patreon. So
yes.
This is a story.
Here's y'all's free sample.
Yes. So this is a story that started just about a month ago, a little over a month ago, and it's been in the news quite a bit since then, and it is pretty weird. So I'm going to talk about the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal.
And this happened quite recently,
Quite
correct?
recently, yes. So March 4th, 2018.
This is something maybe y'all have heard of.
Yeah, definitely. It's been one of the biggest stories in the world. Sergei and Yulia Skripal were found on a park bench in the English town of Salisbury, just down the road from Stonehenge. So this actually links up to a couple of our episodes.
That's it. That's a conspiracy.
Right. And it was the Druids who did it. Now, okay, so Sergei, according to the man who found them, looked like a zombie with his arms kind of straight out and just kind of a dazed look in his eye. And Yulia was laying next to him unconscious.
Oh my god.
And it came out that they had been poisoned by a nerve agent called Novichok that had been smeared on their front door. So when they left that morning, they came into contact with it, and they carried it with them when they went to a pub.
Oh, shit.
And eventually they...
I forgot about this part.
Right. And, you know, about, I think it was over 50 people were exposed in some way. But the only other person who needed to be hospitalized was a police officer who came to their aid. And pretty amazingly and kind of weirdly, Sergei, Yulia, and that officer survived. And even though they were exposed to one of the deadliest forms of nerve agent known to man, like this stuff is more deadly than VX.
I didn't know he survived.
Yeah, they're alive.
Both of them?
Yeah, and Yulia is actually well enough that she's been discharged from the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
I think just a couple of days ago, and moved to an undisclosed location for her own safety, you know, to continue her recuperation. And Sergei has been upgraded out of critical condition. That's also just in the past few days. So neither of them is in critical condition. It looks like they will both survive for the time being. Although whether they'll have lasting health effects, you know, whether that's cognitive or kind of physical, has yet to be seen. The thinking is that they probably will have some lasting effects.
That makes sense.
But, you know, we'll see. Novichok is just not a well-understood substance. It was first created back in, like, the late 80s, early 90s. But it's just never really been used because the international ban on chemical weapons was put into place, like, soon after that, with Russia as a leading member, actually. But they have apparently kept producing chemical weapons. Russia has. And that's where this particular type of chemical weapon, the only place that it's actually produced.
Holy crap.
Right. So, to get back to their recovery, it is very strange, but experts do point out that we don't know really enough about Novichok to make solid judgments on what, kind of we should expect to be seeing. And the Skripals...
Because it's so deadly?
Well, it's extremely deadly, but it's also just not well understood at all. So there just haven't been enough cases of, it being used on people, right, that we can say anything super definitive about what effects it's going to have or should have had, other than we know it's extremely toxic. And the Skripals did receive an antidote and treatment very quickly after their exposure. So that's probably the main thing that helped them.
Why they are not dead.
Exactly. And the attack has been attributed to the Russian state with high probability by most Western countries, including the U.S. Even President Trump said something, vaguely to that effect. But the wider U.S. government has said basically what the U.K. has said, which is that it really only could have been the Russian state that did this. And Sergei was a former GRU member, a Russian military intelligence member, who was secretly a double agent for the British. So he was spying on the British, but then he basically was turned by the British to then spy on the Russians for the British, unbeknownst to the Russians.
What was he originally?
Originally, he was a Russian spy, a member of the Russian military intelligence, the GRU, who was spying on the British. But the British...
he was spying on them,
He was spying on the British,
them.
not for them. But this was found out by the British, who then convinced him to spy for them.
To turn and
become a double agent. This was then found out by the Russians, who put him in prison. I think it was back in 2006 or something like that.
Who is going to make this movie? My God.
I know, right? But Sergei Skripal was released to England as part of a spy swap. And I think that was back in 2010, 2011, something like that. So he's been living in England since then. I think he's been working as kind of like a consultant, basically, a consultant for businesses and things. People wanting to work on their security consultant, basically. But the Russian state and Putin specifically do not seem to have forgotten about him, or people like him.
Yeah.
Because they really despise turncoats. And Putin, as a former high-level officer in the FSB, another intelligence unit in the Russian state, is just really, really, kind of, I think, fixated on these types of people.
So how would you even begin to, accuse somebody of stuff like this?
Well, what the British did was said, this is the evidence that we have. We know that it's Novichok. And we know that the Russians are, as far as anyone knows, the only ones who have ever produced this kind of nerve agent, and the only ones who have access or control of this type of nerve agent. So what they said was, we're going to give the Russians, a few days, I can't remember, 3-4 days or something, to come up with a plausible explanation as to why this isn't them. And the Russians basically said, that's ridiculous. Maybe it was you. Maybe it never happened. Certainly it wasn't us.
I feel like that's 10 times harder, saying, why
sure.
you're not
the
culprit.
it's essentially impossible to prove a negative, but I think you can see where Theresa May and the Brits are coming from, right?
Yeah.
That really there's no other plausible explanation. So, if Russia, some of this nerve agent were to have been stolen at some point and you didn't report it, or if some of it is unsecured somehow and it could have been taken by someone else, let us know. But unless you do, we have to assume that since you're the only ones who have this stuff, you must have had something to do with it. Right?
Oh,
I don't know.
Gosh.
I mean, I feel like, it's like a big statement.
Do you think, what else do you think is going to happen?
I really don't know. I mean, so far, the Brits and about a dozen other countries have expelled about 150 Russian diplomats.
Yeah, I remember
including over 60 from the United States. And Russia has expelled the same number from, those countries. So, there's been that kind of diplomatic row already. But I really don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how much further the investigation can really go at this point. They're not going to be able to pin it down to one particular site, probably, that it was produced from, because they don't have anything to compare it to, and that's kind of necessary to get that kind of, close of a determination as to, exactly where it was produced.
Yeah.
So right now, they're sending it to several different labs for independent testing to confirm that it is Novichok. And that's kind of the next step. But what's going to happen after that, or in a wider sense, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have pointed out the parallels, of course, between this and the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko back in, I did that not too long ago. Was it 2006, I think?
Yeah.
And what happened after that?
You said that this has been brought up again in the news recently, just like his death.
All the time. A lot of the things that I've read or heard about this have made that connection, that this is very much like what happened to Alexander Litvinenko.
Do you think his daughter getting poisoned was on purpose or an accident?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I would have to think that it was probably on accident.
That's what I was thinking. Because I was surprised when I first heard that it was him and his daughter.
Yeah, and they actually weren't, terribly close. They had kind of just recently been kind of reconnecting.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, whatever they think that he was doing, presumably that it was necessary to stop him at this point, right? Who knows? But
exactly,
she doesn't seem to have had anything to do with that. And of course now, at this point, the Russian, they tweeted out after the news that she had been discharged and everything, oh, that's awesome, good, which, if they were the ones who did it, it's just, bizarre, it's this whole weird thing where now they have to, seem like they're empathizing, but they're the perpetrators in all likelihood.
It's so backwards.
I know, I don't. It's a level of duplicitousness that I almost can't even conceive of. It's pathological, but it's a country. It's not like it's one person, I mean, it's all these people who will go out there and just bald-facedly lie. Like Putin did before, he admitted that they invaded Crimea. He kept saying, no, we didn't invade Crimea. We definitely didn't invade Crimea. And then at one point he was like, oh, yeah, we totally did invade Crimea. Yeah, that was us. And we're keeping it. I don't understand it. But in a wider sense, what's going to happen, I think you have to kind of see this in a series of steps that the Russian state has taken, if in fact this was them, that seems to be pointing somewhere.
Our podcast is going to get taken down because you're exposing the Russians.
That would be the best thing for us.
You're fucking right.
Right? Wouldn't we get a lot of press and stuff?
Yeah, maybe. I really don't know.
Perhaps. I hope so.
Mayhap.
So I was going to talk about one other thing in terms of weird shit.
I don't
in
have
the
one.
news. I know.
Mario has double, so I was like... And I also, all I found is, like, really stupid clickbait articles that aren't good.
Do you want to tell us about one?
Missing garden gnome returns home after 8-month adventure.
Aww.
Cops arrest man after confusing donut glaze for crystal meth.
I like that one.
That was actually pretty good.
Yeah. That's also kind of weird. So I was going to talk about this article, really interesting article that I saw in the Washington Post by Miri Kim. And it's about this really strange condition that I'd never heard of called... I was telling you about this one in the car. Yeah, it's called like Capgras syndrome, I think, because it's this French, like whatever psychologist or whatever who found out about it. But essentially, it's this condition that happens with people who have a type of dementia. It's like the second most common type of dementia, and
I missed that part. It's common?
Well, it's not common, but among people who have dementia, people who have the second most common form of dementia, other than Alzheimer's disease, it shows up in a fair percentage of those people.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a large...
Like
it's not a large percentage of the population, per se, but it's a large percentage of the people who have this type of dementia.
Got it.
And it's a condition that basically makes you think that other people, including like family members or even pets, are not themselves, but are in fact somehow duplicates of themselves.
Oh, that's so weird.
Whether that's that they're aliens or that they're clones of themselves or whatever, that these and they don't have they don't have any conception of exactly why necessarily.
So is it something?
But some of them think that it's part of like a grand conspiracy against them as well.
So it sounds a little bit like schizophrenia.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's certainly a delusion, like a massive delusion.
Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
And it can certainly lead to violent, psychotic behavior. Like, people have killed family members because of this, have severely injured family members because of this, because it's not their wife. It's someone who's pretending to be their wife, who is like kidnapped their wife or something or whatever. I mean, it's such a massive delusion that it negates any familial ties or feelings that you have associated with that person.
Did they interview any of these people?
Yeah, it mainly talks about the case of one particular couple, and it mostly talking to the wife who's not suffering. I mean, you can't really interview a person with dementia.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, but this woman who actually was a psychologist herself talked about her husband's case and stuff, and kind of, described what their experience was like. And it can be treated. So they treat it with
pills?
With talk therapy.
Oh.
And or with pills. Yeah, with antipsychotics, mostly, I think. Excuse me. And they have had some success with that. Like, people have been able to, if not completely rid themselves of the delusion, they've been able to manage it so that, they're not constantly trying to get away or injure the person or whatever, but instead are just sort of... And one weird thing that I read in there as well, actually, was that it seems to be tied somehow to vision, because the people, if they talk to their family or whomever on the phone, they don't think that it's not them. Like, it's perfectly fine. They never have the delusion. But if they see them, even if it's just a picture of them, then they will have the delusion.
And they don't know why?
There are some, if not theories, then some pretty well-developed hypotheses as to why this happens. It seems to be tied to two distinct malfunctions in the brain, right? One being the decoupling of the person's face, right?
The what?
Of
the who?
Of the other person's face with that, like, familial feeling that you have with them. So there's like two parts of the brain that connect in order to...
And in this part they're not connecting?
Right, they're not connecting, so that you don't get that rush of kind of emotion when you see your mom or your husband or whomever, right?
That's so crazy.
And then there's another part that doesn't allow you to not feel those feelings toward them. So it's like sort of creates this imbalance where you can't resolve the issue. Your brain knows that it's not that person, but it also knows that it can't not be that. It's like caught in this loop, right?
Okay, that's way too much.
So it has to
so
resolve that somehow. And this is like the way that it resolves it, by like creating this impression that it's like both them and not them. And that they must be somehow like a perfect copy of that person.
So you said it can be not cured, but like
it can be managed.
Talk therapy managed. Would that be like reminding them that like they have this condition?
Yeah, it's, bringing attention to the fact that, this is an irrational thought, that like acknowledging that you're having the thought, but also that it doesn't make sense and that like it's not real. If you ever saw like A Beautiful Mind.
I did see that.
Yeah, like the way that they talked to John Nash about his hallucinations. Like, in your rational mind that what you're seeing is not real because the girl never ages. Like, she never aged. And then he realizes, like, oh, fuck, she never aged. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I know my brain's telling me it's real, but I know in a deeper sense that it's not real.
That was, like, the one thing.
Right.
I, like, didn't catch on to it for a long time.
Oh, the little girl and the guy
and like his best friend,
stuff.
his like best friend or
right,
whatever.
Right.
If y'all want to cry, watch A Beautiful Mind.
It's a very good movie.
Oh my god.
Yeah, very good movie. And then they die at the end of it, right? In that car crash.
No, that happened in real
way
life.
Later.
That happened in
real life. Well,
I
know it happened in real life.
Way later.
Most of the
later.
stuff in the movie happened in real life.
Way after, I know. But
it was
way after the
way
movie.
later. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it happened, but yeah, I guess that wasn't even that long ago. But yeah, that's the show.
It's our quirky kind of episode today.
It was a little short. It's a little late, but yeah.
What episode is this?
Episode 15. That's
All right. Let's keep going.
We've been able to do this 15 weeks in a row.
That's so weird.
Thanks for listening, by the way, y'all.
Yes, please tell all your friends.
Yeah. So we've been like getting on some more platforms. We're on Spotify now.
Yeet.
We're on iHeart. We're on all the different
iTunes,
ones.
SoundCloud.
All the bullshits, as they say on LP on Left Podcast on the Left.
This means that you have no excuse to not listen to us.
Right. And we'll try to be listenable. And I think by next week we'll be recording into our headphones.
Sure.
So
let's see if that works out.
We'll see if that sounds better or what happens with that. So we're on a journey. We've taken the 15th step of many more. Ramble. Anything else?
Nah, man, I'm just chilling.
Chilling like a villain.
Chilling like a villain while we eating fondue. I don't know about me, but I know about you. This is a hello to falsetto.
Do we want to do any
3, 2, swag.
any shout outs of stuff?
I like to be.
You said
Shout out to Justin
you're
Bieber.
gonna listen to the new Cardi B or
I already did.
It's her first album, right?
Yeah, it's her first full album, I think.
That's what I heard.
She's so
I was
good.
kind of surprised.
Did you know that her and Nicki Minaj aren't friends?
I didn't know that. I
wish they were.
I also didn't care.
But
It's like, haven't you ever had friends who aren't friends with each other?
yeah, but like
That's fine. It's whatever.
Panic at the Disco has a new album, and Janelle Monáe has a new album,
Oh, look at that.
and Nicki Minaj has a new album.
Good for them. Good for them.
Black women just pumping it out. And
Right.
Brendan Urie, but pumping it out.
Brendan Urie's not a black woman?
Brendan Urie is the best vocalist of our generation. Period.
Maybe. Not, what's his name that your mom loves?
Bruno Mars.
Bruno Mars.
He has more, not production, but Bruno Mars is more a triple threat than Brendan Urie is.
Mm-hmm. But isn't Brendan Urie done Broadway too?
Damn it.
Like, didn't he just do Kinky
You're
Boots?
right.
Yeah.
Brendan Urie's so perfect.
They should match up in, what was that show called? Celebrity Deathmatch or whatever on MTV?
Yeah, they were like,
Where it was like claymation.
That was weird.
Wouldn't that be like a perfect matchup?
Yeah. That was
Because
like
Bruno Mars would do
oddly-
like the high note thing and like burst his head open.
That was oddly like bloody and gory.
Super gory.
Like, it was weird.
And haven't they brought it back? Like, isn't it like a thing again? I thought so.
I don't know about that. They brought back Wild and Out.
Yeah.
What's next on our list?
I don't know. Should we try to do these like little series? More of these like 3-episode. We'll kind of focus on a certain thing or a certain topic.
If you guys rate and comment and let us know, we'll see what happens.
You can send us an email at mysterymurderythingy@gmail.com.
Or you can follow us on Instagram.
Except there's something on there.
Yeah, there is. There's one picture.
Ooh, a picture.
I'll do better.
Yeah.
I'm getting better.
Yeah. I think that's the theme of this podcast. We'll do better.
Do better.
Maybe that should be our sign off. We'll do better.
All right. Well, good night. We'll do better.
I don't like it.
I was joking. I mean, I thought you were joking.
No, I was serious, but now I don't like it.
No.
Good job by you.
Oh my God. Turn it off.